The Tomb Raider franchise has seen many games over the years since its inception in 1996. The most recent trilogy of games began in 2013 and consists of Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This trilogy tells the origin story of Lara Croft, an archaeologist following in her father's footsteps to uncover the mysteries of the world. I recently had the pleasure of playing all three of these games back to back, and I wanted to make this video to give my opinion on the trilogy as a whole. I'll start by discussing the common features shared amongst all three games so you can get a sense for what these games are all about. I'll then do a deeper dive into each game to determine how each one delivered on these features. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. One of the biggest parts of these Tomb Raider games is traversing the environment. All three games will have you scaling ruins, jumping across gaps, and ziplining down mountains, among other things. Many of the actions you perform wouldn't be that out of place in an Assassin's Creed game. Much of the environment is covered in white paint, which signals that you can climb an object. The paint essentially serves as a guide by directing you along the path you should be going. Most of the time the paint is easy to see, but there are times when it is more difficult to make out. That's where survival instincts come in. Survival instincts is a feature found in all three games that highlights objects of interest in your immediate vicinity. It can highlight tree branches you can swing from, walls you can scale, and barriers that can be destroyed. It also provides you with a marker in the form of a yellow beam that shows you where to go in the main story. Another great use of this feature is the ability to highlight crafting materials and miscellaneous objects found throughout the world, such as salvage, healing leaves, artifacts, and journals. Survival instincts is also useful in solving the various puzzles found throughout these games. Since you are raiding tombs and exploring ruins, one of the other main focuses of these games is puzzle solving. Survival instincts will highlight objects of interest that you can interact with, but it won't tell you what to do with them. If you get stuck on a puzzle, Lara will sometimes offer a hint by speaking out loud when you activate survival instincts. There are many puzzles found throughout the main story, but the trilogy also offers additional puzzles to solve in the form of challenge tombs. Challenge tombs are an excellent combination between environmental traversal and puzzle solving. They are meant to challenge you by using what you've learned about the game's mechanics up to that point to solve the puzzle and find the treasure. These are entirely optional to complete, but they are great breaks from the main story that can be fun to do as well as rewarding. If I'm being honest, I think challenge tombs are one of the trilogy's best features, and I felt that they improved from game to game, which I'll get into later. Another big part of the Tomb Raider games is the combat. All three games give you 4 weapons that you acquire over the course of the game: a bow, a pistol, an auto rifle, and a shotgun, all of which you can upgrade with items found throughout the game. Combat scenarios switch between stealth fights and all-out gunfights. As the name implies, stealth fights have you use various different forms of cover to sneakily kill your enemies or just sneak past them. If you get discovered, an all-out gunfight ensues. Sometimes the game doesn't give you the option for stealth and instead throws you right into a fight where everyone knows where you are. It's important during these fights to use whatever cover you can and prevent the enemy from flanking you, which the AI are pretty good at doing in all three games. Some scenarios will give you objects you can use to take out the enemy with, like explosive barrels, bottles for Molotov cocktails, and fuel you can ignite. Some of these items can also be used during stealth fights to distract enemies and get them alone for you to take them out. Survival instincts also plays a role during combat by highlighting enemies and objects you can use. This feature is actually pretty useful for stealthily taking out enemies because highlighted enemies change color depending on if someone can see them or not. If an enemy is highlighted red, killing them will alert other enemies and a fight will ensue. If they are highlighted yellow, then killing them quietly will not alert anyone. However, if an enemy discovers a dead body, they will alert everyone unless you take them out quickly and quietly. Both combat engagements and exploring the environment can lead to what I'll call action sequences, which basically see you try and escape from some threat. This threat could be an enemy helicopter chasing you or an avalanche that threatens to crush you. Either way, you are required to make split-second decisions where one wrong move will mean your death. An important part of these games is the balance between exploration and puzzles, combat, and fast-paced action sequences. One of the things I'll discuss for each game is whether or not this balance was achieved. The last features I want to talk about before moving on to the games themselves are base camps and artifacts and journals. Base camps are where you can upgrade your gear, acquire new skills, change outfits, and fast travel. Gear is upgraded with items found throughout the map and affects attributes like damage, rate of fire, and reload speed. Performing different actions rewards you with experience that you can use to earn ability points. Some abilities you'll see include reduced damage from enemies, enhanced survival instincts, and deadly finishing moves, among others. As you discover more base camps, you will be able to fast travel between all of them so that you can go back to previous areas. The reason you would do this is to access areas that were previously unreachable due to missing weapons or gear. These areas all contain optional items like artifacts and journals, which help enhance the story for each game. These items will give you some background on where you are and the culture of the area. They can also tell you about prior events and even what certain characters are thinking during the events of the game. They are nice additions to these games that I feel really help with the storytelling. Now that we've covered the basics of the trilogy, let's do a deeper dive into each game. The first game in the trilogy is 2013's Tomb Raider, and it starts off with Lara's search for the kingdom of Yamatai. During her search, a violent storm shipwrecks Lara and the crew of the Endurance on a strange island in the infamous Dragon's Triangle. As you try to find your missing friends, you discover a group of people living there who start killing the crew and taking prisoners. The game has you work to regroup with your friends and find a way off the island. Along the way, you discover more about the island and the dangerous group of people who inhabit it. It's a great story to introduce you to the world of Tomb Raider. When I first played this game, one of the first things I noticed was how simple the game is, and that's a good thing. There aren't a bunch of complicated systems to learn, which makes it easy to pick up and play. You start off the game with literally nothing and acquire new gear and weapons over the course of your adventure. The game does a good job of letting you test out your new equipment when it's given to you, by giving you environments, puzzles, and enemies on which to test them on. When it comes to gathering resources, there is only one resource in the game: salvage. This item allows you to upgrade your weapons and can be found in crates scattered throughout the island or as rewards in challenge tombs. While you can harvest food from plants and animals, you don't actually get any materials from them, only experience points. In terms of pacing, Tomb Raider does an excellent job of balancing how much time is spent doing certain activities. Over the course of a single hour playing the game, I usually got to experience exploration, both stealth combat and full gunfights, puzzles, and action sequences to some degree, which helped keep things fresh and interesting. I enjoyed all of the activities and didn't feel that any of them dragged on for too long. Challenge tombs were welcome side activities during breaks in the action that really helped solidify the feeling of being a Tomb Raider. The tombs in this game aren't as long as the ones in the other games, but that doesn't stop them from being enjoyable. Being rewarded with salvage for your efforts was nice, but both Rise and Shadow do a better job of rewarding you for completing these optional puzzles. Those games both give you abilities that you can't get anywhere else, which gives you extra incentive to seek them out. Rewards aside, challenge tombs are still a great part of the first Tomb Raider and are definitely worth seeking out. Combat was also a very enjoyable part of the game for me, especially stealth combat. It was fun trying to take everyone out undetected, and it made me feel like a real assassin. I definitely messed up at times and would just get bombarded with gunfire and explosives. Sometimes I would reload the last checkpoint to try again so I could get it right, but other times I just lived with my mistake and went full Rambo. Regular gunfights were also well executed, providing a good challenge without being overly difficult. I was impressed by the AI and their ability to get you out of cover. Sitting in one place for too long during a fight is never a good idea, as enemies will hurl explosives at you to get you to move. They also have some enemies that charge at you with melee weapons and others that try and flank you. This keeps you very active during combat, meaning you won't play the whole game sitting behind one cover until everyone is dead. In regards to artifacts and journals, I thought the game did an excellent job of providing background on the people who used to live on the island, as well as providing insight into what certain characters are thinking during the events of the game. Some of the journals you find relate to the crew of the Endurance that you are trying to escape with. My favorite part about these journals is that they are narrated in the voice of the person who wrote it. This helps enhance what is being said and really gives you a better understanding of the mindset of the person who wrote it. I actually have a problem with how this was executed in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I will discuss later. Overall, the first Tomb Raider game is a great start for the trilogy. The story is great, and the game's mechanics are easy to learn and fun to execute. The game builds a solid foundation for the next two games to build on. Switching over to Rise of the Tomb Raider, let me start out by saying that this game is my favorite one in the trilogy. I really enjoyed the first game, but this sequel takes it to a whole nother level. The game basically takes everything from the first game and injects it with steroids. The graphics are amazing, the puzzles are more involved, the combat is even more challenging in a good way, and the story is even better. New features like crafting and the grapple axe provide more ways to play the game that make it a ton of fun to play. It was honestly a pleasure to play from start to finish. The story this time sees Lara searching for something called the Divine Source, which was supposedly found by someone called the Prophet over 1,000 years ago. This is something Lara's father had been researching obsessively before his untimely death. After the events of the first game, Lara decides to continue her father's work and find the Divine Source. This gets her into trouble with a dangerous group of fanatics known as Trinity, who are also looking for the artifact. After clashing with them in Syria, Lara travels to Siberia to find the lost city of Kitesh, where she believes the source is located. One of the reasons I like the story so much is the major characters involved. The main villain is a man named Constantine who believes he was chosen by God to find the divine source and change the world. This makes him an incredibly dangerous man to deal with, as he will do pretty much anything to achieve his goal. Audio logs found throughout the game provide deeper insight into the man's mental state and beliefs, which helps flesh out his backstory and makes him a more complex villain. You also learn a lot about him from listening to soldiers talk and from other audio logs where different people talk about him. Other characters in the game, such as Jacob and Anna, are also great characters that help make the story fantastic. When I first loaded the game, one of the things that immediately drew me in was the graphics. Rise of the Tomb Raider is a beautiful game to play, with environments ranging from snowy mountains to wooded valleys to desert tombs. The game takes full advantage of the current console generation's power to make these stunning environments look breathtaking. It's nice to just walk around and take it all in. Beyond the improved graphics, the second game also features an expanded selection of abilities to choose from at base camps, as well as a new crafting system for upgrading your gear. You can now collect wood from trees, pelts from animals, ore from caves, and healing leaves from plants, among other things. Some of these items can also be used to craft different types of ammo or on-the-fly weapons, like using cloth to make Molotov cocktails. Healing leaves also introduce the ability to heal yourself on the fly, which was not an option in the first game. You previously had to not take damage for a certain amount of time before you started healing. On harder difficulties, you couldn't even heal unless you were out of combat. While these features can also be found in Rise of the Tomb Raider, you are also given the option to heal manually, which is a nice addition for dealing with tough combat encounters. Crafting also allows you to increase the amount of ammo and resources you can carry, which is also very helpful. Overall, I think crafting makes for an improved gameplay experience. It gives you something to work towards and encourages you to explore and pay attention to your surroundings. Being able to craft ammo and heal on the go opens up different fighting strategies, giving you more options for dealing with enemies. Challenge tombs make their return and are a bit more involved than they were in the first game. They are still great optional challenges for you to complete, and they reward you with abilities you can't get anywhere else, which makes them even more worth seeking out. The tombs also include documents and relics specific to each tomb to provide some background on where you are and what happened. As in the first game, combat switches between stealth and gunfights, and it is still very enjoyable. The addition of throwable objects to create distractions opens up more stealth strategies by allowing you to separate enemies from each other. You can also hide in bushes to ambush your enemies, similar to ambushing them from behind cover. In gunfights, enemies are still pretty smart and are good at getting you to move out of cover. There are new enemies with body armor that can be a pain to deal with, but the added difficulty makes fights more interesting instead of frustrating. Action sequences play out the same as they do in the first game, requiring split-second decision-making to avoid death. These sequences don't really add anything new from game to game, they just change the situation Lara is trying to escape from, which is totally fine. The last addition made for Rise of the Tomb Raider that I'll discuss is Byzantine coins. These are unmarked currency that you'll find scattered throughout the map. These coins are used to purchase items from the only vendor in the game. These items are not required to complete the game, but they can make gameplay a little bit easier. Examples of items that are sold include a rope ascender to climb ropes more quickly, and a commando assault rifle, which is one of the better weapons in the game. The whole system basically serves as another collectible for you to find with some rewards tagged onto it. It's an okay system that, in my opinion, doesn't really add much to the overall gameplay experience. Some of these coins can be found by deciphering monoliths found throughout the game. These monoliths require you to be proficient in a specific language, which you learn from reading old documents. I like the idea of learning languages to decipher monoliths, but I don't like the reward being more Byzantine coins. I would have preferred the reward be an important piece of lore, or a new ability, or something like that. Those grievances aside, Rise of the Tomb Raider is easily my favorite game of the trilogy. The improved graphics, story, puzzles, and abilities build upon the solid foundation that the first game had laid. The game is an improvement in pretty much every way, and sets the stage well for the final act of the trilogy. And now we come to Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This is a game that I honestly have a lot of mixed feelings about. Objectively, this is a good game. It contains all the basic elements and features found in the first two games, and even improves upon some of them. However, some changes were made to existing mechanics that I did not like. These were not game-breaking changes, but compared to what had been done in the first two games, it was a step in the wrong direction. Like the other games, I'll start with the story and work my way from there. The story in Shadow of the Tomb Raider sees Lara continuing her fight against the organization known as Trinity. This time, she finds herself in Mexico trying to stop Trinity from finding whatever it is they're looking for. In her haste to stop Trinity, she unknowingly causes a series of cataclysms that can only be stopped through a ritual involving 2 ancient artifacts. Lara travels to Peru in order to find these artifacts and stop the cataclysms. Taken by itself, the story is a good one. However, while the story may be good overall, there was a portion of it that I did not like. Trinity is the main antagonist in this game again, but we don't see too much of them except at the beginning and the end. Further, we don't really learn much about the organization as a whole. You battle against 2 of the top people in Trinity, but there are others we never get to meet and questions we still never get answered. Rise of the Tomb Raider did an excellent job of setting Trinity up as this mysterious organization and left the door open for us to learn more about them in the next game. While we technically learn a little bit more about them, it was not enough to satisfy me in the end. Another part of the story I did not like was how the game treated journals. Unlike in previous games where these were narrated by the person who wrote or recorded them, they are now all narrated by Lara herself. For me, this was a bad change because you lose a sense of connection with the person who wrote it. You lose out on the fear the person may have been feeling or the awe they may have experienced when writing it. These connections really helped enhance the story for me in the first 2 games, and losing them here was a big disappointment. There are also no journals or recordings from the 2 main villains in the game, Dr. Dominguez and Commander Rourke. You get some background on them, but nothing like what you get in Rise of the Tomb Raider. The audio recordings in the second game really fleshed out Constantine's character and made me appreciate him as a villain. The lack of such recordings in this game negatively affected my perception of Dominguez and Rourke as villains because I never really knew what drove them. Through the main story, you do learn a little bit about Dominguez, which is helpful, but you learn nothing about Rourke. On a more positive note, this game is somehow even more beautiful than the second game. You spend most of your time in the jungle and in ancient ruins, and the detail put into these environments is absolutely amazing. I really enjoyed the atmosphere of challenge tombs especially, many of which had fire everywhere to give it a very ritualistic feel. I found myself stopping at times just to take it all in. Speaking of challenge tombs, I think the ones found in Shadow of the Tomb Raider are some of the best ones yet. They continue the trend of getting more involved than those found in the prior game, and the combination of puzzle solving and traversing the environment is executed beautifully. New features like rappelling and lengthy underwater trips add additional obstacles for you to overcome. You could swim underwater in Rise of the Tomb Raider, but it was fairly simple. In this game, you have to locate pockets of air in order to have enough oxygen to make it through. Challenge tombs continue to remain a highlight of this trilogy and reward you for your efforts with abilities you can't get anywhere else, just like in the second game. There is actually a lot more exploring and puzzle solving in Shadow of the Tomb Raider than in previous games. Throughout the main story, you must complete an array of challenges in order to progress deeper into the ruins you are exploring. Prior games also had these features in the main story, but I feel this third game leans a little more heavily into them. While they may be strong points of the game, featuring them more unfortunately causes the pacing in this game to suffer. Combat scenarios happened much less frequently than in previous games, and really only became more frequent towards the end of the game. One of my favorite aspects of this trilogy is stealth combat, and there weren't as many opportunities for this as I would have liked. Additionally, I found stealth in this game to be much more difficult than in previous games for some reason. I played both Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider on the hardest difficulties, and did not have as much trouble with stealth as I did with this game, which I also played on the hardest combat difficulty. I made mistakes in those games, sure, but I also felt I improved my stealth combat over the course of the 2 games. In Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it felt like I was missing something, as I kept alerting enemies constantly. For regular gunfights, which were also less frequent, they were about the same as in prior games. Enemies are still good at flanking you and getting you out of cover. You still get a bow, a pistol, an auto rifle, and a shotgun, and can upgrade them at base camps. The last feature of Shadow of the Tomb Raider that I want to touch on is the difficulty of the game, which I have already briefly mentioned. Unlike in the previous 2 games, Shadow of the Tomb Raider breaks out difficulty based on combat, exploration, and puzzles. In theory, this is a great idea, as it allows you to craft your gameplay experience to how you want to play. You can decide to make puzzles harder to solve by making survival instincts useless but keep enemies at a lower difficulty. Or you can make enemies tougher to beat but keep your survival instincts. While this may be good in theory, I don't think it was properly executed in this game. The way they handled combat difficulty was fine, but the way they handled exploration and puzzle difficulty was not great. They needed to have more difficulty options in order to really let you customize your gameplay experience. For example, on normal puzzle difficulty, objects you can interact with are highlighted in yellow when you activate survival instincts, and Lara gives general hints for solving the puzzle. On hard puzzle difficulty, items are not highlighted and Lara gives no hints. I personally wanted to play with objects highlighted through survival instincts but did not want Lara to give any hints. However, there was no option for this, so I had to choose between 2 options that each had something I didn't want. I ultimately decided on the normal puzzle difficulty so that I could get the highlighted objects. Then, while playing the game, I discovered an ability in the skill tree that gives you your survival instincts on the hard puzzle difficulty, which was not made known to me at the start of the game. The developers should have either increased the number of difficulty options to allow more flexibility, or at least made this ability known when choosing your difficulty at the start of the game. This did not ruin my gameplay experience, but it did have a negative impact on it. Overall, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is worth playing, even with the issues I've described. It continues improving certain aspects like exploration and puzzle solving, and its story does a decent job of wrapping up the trilogy, though it could have been better in certain areas. While it can technically be played by itself, I recommend playing the other two games first, as they are, in my opinion, superior experiences overall. And that does it for my review of the Tomb Raider Reboot Trilogy. I definitely recommend it to anyone who is a fan of action-adventure games, as it's full of fast-paced action, great stories, superb combat, fun exploration, and puzzle solving. If you enjoyed playing Assassin's Creed games back in the day, you might find a little bit of that in these games. And thank you very much for watching. This is the first time I've reviewed a game and made a video like this, so I would appreciate any feedback you might have for me. If you liked it, please let me know. If you hated it, please tell me how I can make future videos like this better. I really enjoyed making this type of video, and I plan on making more in the future. Thanks again, and good luck on your tomb raiding adventures.